I think the girls with their nails done now. Girls with their nails done. I think the girls with their nails done. Girls with their nails done. I think the girls with their nails done now. Girls with their nails done. I think the girls with their nails done. Girls with their nails done.
Man, if that don't get you fired up and ready for some football, golly, man, it's almost here. Hey, we're at week 0, right? We got college football games this week. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Shane, what's going on, man?
Not much, Kelly in the comments was saying 9 days till the big game for the Mountaineers, but like you said, it's 0 week. We're gonna have some college foosball coming up.
That's
and
right.
It's chilly.
Hey, guess what?
Football weather.
Guess what, guys? We have strategist consultant. Just a great guy all the way around. The man with the plan. The man that's always look. I was like trying to do some numbers in my head earlier, and I was like, okay, forget this. Call Tony. Tony Altenbour's with us. What do you say, Tony?
Hey guys, how you doing? Good to see you. Go Mountaineers.
Go Mountaineers. That's right. Go Mountaineers.
I'm looking forward to your game against Penn State. I think it's going to be a fun game. It's one of the early season games I'm looking most forward to.
I think a lot of people are looking forward to it. Just not a lot of people are giving West Virginia a chance. I think they're going to be real surprised.
It's week 1. Everybody has a chance.
Everybody has a chance in week 1. And West Virginia's got a lot of returning production coming back. And a much better team than last year, much more experienced. We were a young team last year. Anybody that watched that Penn State game would tell you, we kind of hung with Penn State. And the score might not indicate it, but let's think about it. They scored with 6 seconds to go.
You never know what's going to happen with them.
Yeah. Well, I know one thing. I hope that there's 6 seconds left in this game and we're ahead by 10 or 12 points and we're down on the 3-yard line. I hope like hell that Neil Brown goes for it. Oh, man. I just hope like hell he goes for it. I don't give a shit if we fumble at that point and they return it for a touchdown. It doesn't matter to me.
Tony, I have a question for you. We talked about this last week, and I've been banging the drum that, and I'm taking the side. I'm just taking my West Virginia, fandom and putting it aside. Do you think this is this is a big deal for the Big 12 if West Virginia pulls this off and wins? How important is that for the Big 12 to get these non-conference wins, especially this one against, a tier 1 Big 10 school, as they say?
So I would actually step back a little bit for that. And here's my view. The most important thing I think for the Big 12, and like you guys have some crazy fans that hate me, but I actually like the real people of the Big 12. You guys know this. The most important thing for the Big 12 to be successful, I think, strategically long term, is not to blow games like to MAC teams like they did last year. Like last year, I think there were 3 Big 12 losses to MAC teams or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Texas Tech.
We talked about that too.
Colorado,
Iowa State.
That really takes the wind out of the sails. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like,
So the first thing I would say to do is you want to shore up the bottom by not having embarrassing losses. And then the next thing that you want to avoid is embarrassing. It's just embarrassing losses overall, right? Like you don't want to lose to Penn State, 35-0 or something. However, so those are like the things you want to avoid. I think that's most important for the Big 12 is avoid stuff that makes the conference look like it's not competitive. However, if you have like an epic game against Penn State or you beat Penn State, which is again very possible, like that, that's not like I think not losing to them is important for the conference. That, however, would be just a win for the conference. That.
I was thinking about that today myself, Tony. So I was thinking I've been saying all along it's the biggest game in the Big 12 this year. And if West Virginia can pull it out, it would say a lot for the Big 12. But at the same time, there could be a downfall too. Should West Virginia lose to Penn State and go on to win the Big 12? That could be a bad.
But if you lose to Penn, I'm making this up, right? You lose to Penn State, 27-19. Like nothing, no bad from that. No bad. I mean, right. It sucks for my Mountaineer friends, but like there's no negative implications of losing that game. Like I view this game as long as you don't get smoked. I view this game as nothing but upside for the conference.
I agree with that.
That's the thing is because I've heard a lot of people say it's the most important, and I'm like, it could be if you look great,
yeah.
But if you're just okay, even, and you lose and you're just okay, it's like it's not. It's the great thing about it is I think it's mostly all opportunity. It's not bad. Now, what you don't want to do is the Dan Lanning, Oregon, Georgia thing, where you start off and you lose 62-3. And you get the team together through the end of the season, and the team at the end of that Oregon team at the end of that season, that was a pretty good team.
Yeah,
right. Like really good team, but like everybody kind of laughed because very game number 1, and someday when Dan Lanning's sitting there with like national championship trophies and cigars, they're gonna laugh that his game number 1 was a disheveled 62-3 whooping. Because I think Dan Lanning's awesome, but you just as long as you don't have that, I think your guys are gonna be good to go.
Well, so what I was running numbers about and why I called Tony is I was like, okay, can universities afford all this NIL, all these payments, these bad payments, these $20 million, $30 million, whatever the number finally is. I don't know what the number finally came to be. Can the universities afford it? So I brought Tony on. I see him sharing the screen down here. Tony, you may put that up?
Sure.
All right, so Tony's got you got the West Virginia emblem on there. Cool. So Tony's been running some numbers and things and talking about which teams. And I think you went nationwide. Am I right? You went like nationwide.
So this actually what we're looking at here. This is some brand new stuff. Like literally finished like 5 minutes ago. It's why like the headlines aren't all consistent and everything. Like literally in process for some stuff. And what I did is I kind of modified it a little bit so we can look at the Big 12. And we want to look here at when we think about the new world and the new financial model we're going to, we want to see like who in the Big 12 is well positioned for that and who's not. Just to get a handle on like how is the Big 12 right? Like the Big 12 schools ready to compete financially and like who can really like pump money in if they're going to have to pump money in, who's making money now, who's hemorrhaging money and is going to have to figure something out real quick. So I think there's some really interesting stuff here that you guys are going to get a kick out of.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question before we ever even get started?
Yeah.
Is Arizona State hemorrhaging money?
Arizona State is actually the most interesting of all of these because they're not anymore.
Ah, cool. All right. Well,
and when we get to Arizona State, now by what most people would consider the rules of accounting, you know what? Hold on. We'll hold on with that. Stay tuned, guys. Arizona State is fascinating.
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Tony, I don't know where you're going to go with this, and I'm just going to let you do it. But first off, I want to tell everybody that you can find Twitter. You can find Tony over on X. It's not Twitter anymore. Over on X and all his social medias at TJ Altimore. Be sure you like, follow, subscribe to anything he does. Tony's amazing, and you're going to find out tonight. All right, Tony, it's all yours, brother.
Thanks, guys. Well, I thought first let's take a look at just like who's making money and who's not. Now, there's a couple things here about when we look at financial numbers for colleges. There's a couple things I want you guys to remember. First of all, it's not a business. You're not supposed to be trying to make money. So that's like the number one thing. Like when you look at a school that's like hugely, the reason nobody's hugely making money is that's not the goal. You don't get to keep it. You know, so schools aren't usually very positive in that, which is a good thing, right? The next thing is that the finances we get from schools, when you guys get them, there's a couple of things that are convoluted about them. The first one is they're not really the school's finances. They're standardized reporting. So the schools all hire accounting firms who come in and reconstruct the school's finances to fit these sort of like standards that go into reporting. And then even then, it's only operating expenses. So there's not capital expenditures. No, they don't count the debt. Sometimes they count the debt. Sometimes they don't. So there's a lot of complications to this. So, you know, when you look at two schools like that are really close together, like it's not that one nudged the other out. Like you got to kind of view the stuff as a little more directional, which is kind of interesting. You know, so like if you see like, oh, they beat us by like $1 million. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. You know, because the accounting gets a little messy. So I just give you guys that as a caveat. So if you look on the left here, and this is for FY23, which is the newest year we have numbers for. This is and for the public Big 12 schools. Here's who was making money. Only 4 of them. So you had 4 of them that were actually ahead. And by the way, when we say making money, that means that like, you know, you then took that money, you spent it on like capital expenditures and stuff. So what's interesting here is you really have, if you take a look, there's two groups here with Utah in the middle. There's the old Big 12 schools who are all very, very well run financially. Like the Big 12 school and the Big 12 schools financially are very frugal and very well run. Then you have the G5 schools who are just dumping money into their departments to try to like get up to speed. And then you have the Pac-12 schools who are just dumping money overall, and Utah somewhere in the middle. So what we did here in the middle is we said, all right, we're talking about the Big 12 here. So let's pretend, let's take all these numbers up to be like Big 12 schools. Like, what if everybody was getting Big 12 money? Because remember, the Pac-12, this was like Larry Scott era. Like, remember, they were like wringing their noses and like they had Comcast messes, you know, all this stuff. So like, let's fix everybody to give everybody Big 12 money. And so that's what the middle does. It fixes everybody giving Big 12 money. And what do we see? Well, now we see, this is really interesting here. Those G5 schools are all of a sudden doing okay. This was really interesting for me. I'll be honest, I did not expect before I did this that the G5 schools would look as good as they do with Big 12 money.
I've always noticed that. I've always noticed, like, you know, you'll see the financial reports at the end of every season for just any college football team or in any program. So I'll look at West Virginia's, and it's always like $109 million in, $109 million out.
Exactly.
Like, no money in it. You know there's more.
You're not trying to make money. You want to be by zero.
Right.
Yep.
In fact, if you're not by zero, it means there's an accounting issue, right? Like you were fundraising for something and you brought a whole bunch of money in. There's one year that Oregon is really screwy because somehow under the weird accounting rules that they use, they had to show that like $300 million that Phil Knight gave them came in. And so they just show up with like a $300 million prop, which is not at all true. It was like to build the stadium, something like that.
Right.
So yeah, again, the stuff is you want to be you want to be around 0 or positive. That means you're doing fine. If you're a little bit negative, that's also fine, because one of the issues, which we're going to show this in just a minute, is remember that you're also paying the school for scholarships. Like the athletic department is paying the school. So there's kind of a net factor in there. We'll look at it in just a minute on some other stuff. But again, the thing is, you don't want to be like those guys at the bottom that are just like massively losing money. And so when you look at the Big 12, everybody's in not bad shape, other than the Pac schools, but they have their own issues. We'll get to in a sec too. So I thought that was really interesting. So the next question is, you guys have heard a lot about this whole issue of like, should everybody turn walk-ons into scholarship players, the scholarship athletes? There's a whole lot of debates on that, but one of the big issues is it's fairly costly to do that. So you're looking at, depending on how you want to calculate the scholarships, and they get kind of messy. To do that would cost anywhere from, this is sort of based on the value of walk-ons, some math that I did. You're looking at anywhere, for West Virginia here, they would need an extra, at least $5 million to boost people up. And the problem with the walk-ons is, remember, guys, walk-ons pay to go to school. So the scholarship athletes, there's all sorts of accounting games in the way that scholarships are handled.
Oh.
But remember, the school's paying itself, right? There's a lot of games between like athletics is paying, central campus, who's then paying the econ department. So there's a lot of paying of yourself in that, which is sort of bogus, right? But the issue is when you think about new scholarships, converting walk-ons to scholarship. Well, that kid was paying tuition, and now he's not.
Right.
And at schools that have like capacity caps, right? Like, I don't know, let's pick on Stanford, right? You could make an argument that like Stanford is, as full as Stanford wants to be. Like Stanford can afford it. They're probably a bad example, but you're talking about taking money that was coming in from parents and is now not coming in, that you have to figure out. So that's just another perspective on walk-ons.
Now, this new, this 20 million or whatever that these universities get, there's no more scholarship limits, but they can take like 2.5 million and throw it towards the scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
The first 2.5 million of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that they can use to cover it. And we're going to look at every Big 12 school and the whole range of their financials. We actually have a card page for each school that we're going to look at.
Okay.
That shows that on it too.
Oh, good. Great.
So the next question I have, when I think about, can you afford it? And people get mad at me for when I do this, but I think this is really interesting. Like this slide, I think is fascinating. So one of the questions is, how much of your budget gets spent on sports? And now this here is total budget, because I think total budget matters. Like, for example, when you guys see the stuff, how you guys see like a lot of times like all sorts of signs where like the health system is like the sponsor of the athletic department.
Right.
Yeah, in a lot of schools, that's a scam. That's a way for them to vastly overcharge the health system, so that they can like essentially like not launder money in a bad way, but like guilt-free launder money to get it from the all the money of the hospital into the athletic department. That happens in some of these schools. So like having a huge school with all kinds of resources just means there's more resources, that it's like easier to absorb things. So notice, for example, like we were talking about Arizona State. Arizona State's going to come back. Notice like how Arizona State has a lot of money. Notice how Utah has a lot of money. Colorado's been hemorrhaging cash. Oh, but and Colorado's also a little masked, right? So this includes like offsite health systems and stuff like that too, because it's important. But now look at like TCU. TCU spends 25%, almost 25% of their budget on sports.
Wow. That is unbelievable. So is that sustainable? Is that sustainable for TCU?
So TCU is a pretty wealthy school, But when we look at that budget, TCU's like entire budget is $600 million or something like that.
Wow.
It's harder for TCU to like find $20 million than it is for Utah.
Right. Yeah, obviously.
So, I mean, that's an issue. Now, obviously, the thing about TCU is that they fully control that $600 million, right? Like, Utah, there's like a cancer center in there. So there's different, all of these schools have different issues. But when you look at like TCU and Baylor, it's essentially, anything you need, I would argue that donors have to give. They're not just going to find $20 million behind the couch cushions like Stanford or Berkeley can. You got to find that. The other one that's really interesting that we're going to get to, and we look at Kansas State. Kansas State is fascinating because Kansas State operates on no subsidy. And Kansas State is like a paragon of like everything that could be like right about athletics finances. Like Kansas State has never won a national championship in anything.
Wow.
But they also don't take any student money and spend it on sports. I had a conversation with a senator's office a couple weeks ago, and they had a whole bunch of questions. We were breaking down a lot of numbers and stuff. And one of their big concerns is like they see the money exploding in college sports, and they're really worried that money is going to turn into everybody gets more student loans so that we can have more money in sports. And the senator was really worried about that, apparently. And so, you look at a school like Kansas State, no taxpayer money, no student money goes towards subsidizing the sports department. So it's like, Kansas State, you're doing everything right. Now, the price of that is you've never won a national championship in anything. Because if you want to win the water polo national championship, you got to spend on water polo. The other issue with Kansas State is their enrollment is plunging. Kansas State's like half the size it is like today that it was when I was there last time.
Wow.
So I don't know what's going on, but Kansas State has remained like brilliantly frugally run. They don't have any, no subsidies or anything like that. But at the same time, like the question when we start to think about like, okay, can you afford to like throw down when you need to? And I'll give you another great example. Cal financials were not in a good place. You guys probably heard like about Cal having like bad financials.
Right.
So they just like wrote off half the stadium debt and decided they're going to start giving the athletic department $35 million a year. They just are like, okay. And essentially what they're doing, and Baylor, by the way, Baylor does this. Baylor athletics are hugely subsidized, right? But like Baylor just like decides they want to be good, they want to have nice things, and they have donors who will pay, and so they just do. And I value that. Like to have the ability to pay and then just to do it is great. The problem is the schools that are like shelling out the money and they can't afford it. And so that's what we're looking for. So right, so like you think about like TCU, they find ways to afford it. Baylor finds ways to afford it. Arizona hasn't had the money and is plunging. And we're going to look at some other stuff like that. Like I was really worried about, like I've questioned before about some of the G5 schools, that having real issues. The Sun Belt schools, they're spent losing a fortune, and they're not moving up to the Big 12 like these guys are. Like again, when we saw that chart just a minute ago in the last one, and we saw, okay, things are going to look okay for UCF and Cincinnati. Now, of course, their costs are going up too, right? So they're not going to ever probably hit these numbers, but we're moving towards the okay area. But I thought that this was really neat here. Again, let's think about the resources.
I noticed.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Johnny. I was noticing that it looks like, though, as I sat and drew it in my head, it looks like everybody in the Big 12's got a pretty equal budget in athletics. I mean, maybe not completely equal, obviously, but pretty similar, because if you look, TCU obviously like takes in $600 million, and 24% of that is going to
TCU is the biggest spender.
Right, and then you look at the others, and they're not spending much of their budget, but their budget's a lot. They're not their bud. Yeah, their budget's a lot bigger.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
they are pretty steady. They're all a lot of them are about that like 100 and some million range, like 110, 120 million. So they're all like pretty solid. Like, and when we look at them, you guys will see like the Big 12 athletic departments are pretty solidly run. Your issue there is Arizona, which has not been well run, and Colorado, which has not been well run. And then Arizona State's on a different level because of what they're doing something different. So I'll show you guys that when we get to it. But so the other question, we think about like, can you afford it? And this is my issue with like some of the Sunbelt schools is like they have huge subsidies, but they also have small student bodies. So the kids are paying a lot. Versus Central Florida, they had a huge subsidy, but it's a giant school.
Yeah.
So I took a look at the total students versus the number of athletes. Oh, sorry, this slide got a little screwed up here. Sorry, guys. So on the right is your total number of students. But I did something interesting here. People don't look at this. I actually got the actual total numbers of students. So this includes if you have an offsite med school. Arizona State has like a really profitable online division. If you have like again med school that's offsite, or Houston has 2 satellite campuses in Houston. So this combines those things that often don't get combined, because again those people are paying money into the school. Like, so I want to get the real look at how many students the school has. And remember, I told you Kansas State was like losing enrollment, like hemorrhaging students.
yeah,
Kansas State's
it seems to me like their numbers just a few years ago was like 31,000.
Yeah, they were around West Virginia. Just a few years ago, they were neck and neck.
Although I do think we may be falling into the old guy definition of a few years ago.
Yeah.
Well, we might be. I'm probably thinking like 2012.
I was at Kansas State just recently. It was like, oh my God, that was not recently.
Yeah, it's the old guy syndrome, right? Yeah. So to me, yesterday was 1988.
Exactly. I actually know. Honest, more serious though. I think it's been about like a 20-year decline. I can't do. But yeah, they used to be way bigger. So like. One of the things we think about here is with all these changes is sort of like the ability to absorb a shock. So, for example, Washington just did some financing Washington is going to lose $30 million this year. A lot of it, or the coming year, I think, a lot of it having to do with like the transition to the Big Ten and the Pac-10, the Pac-12 like payouts didn't get to be what they thought about. So, but like Washington moved some money around and that was fine. Again, when you have more students and you have more money, you have that ability to absorb the shock and that ability to be like, oh, you know what? Well, okay, we'll throw some extra. You don't have to scrimp and all, and you don't have to cut as much. Because we'll talk about this. Like cutting, I think, is going to be really painful for people. So this whole like who has how many students and who has how much money in budget. If you got a lot of and a lot of students means you got people to potentially spread it over, as long as you're not piling too much on the backs of your students. And a whole lot of budget, again, is great as long as you're not, taking money from cancer. So again, you kind of see, who can easily afford it. You got those PAC schools up there. Central Florida is a giant school, and in West Virginia here, you guys aren't as big, but you're not small. But you have enough resources. You're pretty much in good shape. So I thought that was really interesting.
That is.
So now this is going to be a little more complicated here, but we have one of these for every school, and this walks through your whole athletic finances and what it would look like with the new stuff. So here, when we take a look at here, you guys, West Virginia, we'll spend more time in West Virginia than everybody else because this is you guys. West Virginia generates about $99 million of athletic revenue. And then they subsidize, by the way, these are a combination sometimes of different things, which is sometimes breaking the rules. But like we try to give you guys the best numbers. So to do that, again, it's pulling sometimes like one point from one place and 1 point from another. You guys file 3 major athletic disclosure reports plus what you give to the state. So, sometimes those numbers, depending on, again, we talked about how like they're combining different things here. So that's, your numbers are a little goofy. Sometimes they get a little goofy for anybody. Because again, you guys have that, the Mountaineer Athletic Fund, right? Is that what it's called?
Right.
So
yeah, go ahead.
Again, I don't know the exact details of West Virginia, but essentially, remember, there's an accountant who goes through and pretends that's all one thing and creates these numbers from it based on different rules. So it can kind of be a little screwy. If you're like, it wasn't 99, it was 97. Like there's some accounting issues in some of these. But so yes, you generate about 99. You then they subsidize another 6.5, which I think is the student pass or whatever money. Then they get to go to the games for free or something like that. Yeah. But it counts as a subsidy. Then you actually spent like money going out, $92 million. And then you gave the school 10.8. So you gave the school $11 million to pay for the scholarships. So remember, when we think about subsidies, the West Virginia, the university is giving you guys $6.5 million from the students, but then you're paying the university 10.8. So actually, West Virginia Athletics is paying West Virginia more than they're getting back. So that's an interesting piece. Okay. So if you net it out, like if you think about, on the books here, you come out to, if you count the subsidies, you come out to a 2.8 million in the black. But if we take out those subsidies, right? Like we say, school, you take your money back. And also, by the way, we're not going to pay you for scholarships because it doesn't actually cost you anything for that kid to sit in an econ class. Like you didn't have to spend anything for that. You can make an argument about room and what on the margins, you didn't have to pay anything for it. You actually come out to there, that second one, that unsubsidized profitability, the second black one, you guys are 7 million in the black. This is really, again, since we're not trying to make money, we're not a private equity firm here. So like, that's a really good place to be.
Now, how's that compared to like, just out of curiosity, is that like an average number for a lot of universities, or is that lower than most universities?
We'll go through the whole Big 12 in just a minute.
Yeah, but if you're private equity, they really want what 15%, around in there. I mean,
remember, companies are making 10 or depending on the company, anywhere from 3 to 20% usually. In profits vary by company, by industry, and all that.
8%. Let's just say 7.2 out of 99 million is 8%, or what 7.9 or whatever.
Yeah, you're clearing well. West Virginia does really well. Yeah, so you guys are pretty solid. And now let's look at the next piece here, which is the next piece. So remember we were talking about the real question is, can you afford it? What do you look like with if you were to fully spend on this stuff? So you were talking about the current estimate that they're using is about $22 million is probably going to be about what the revenue share thing will do.
1 second, Tony. We have Joey and we have a question about that. Is that $22 million a year, or is the first year $22 million? It's less after that.
No. So the way it's $22 million a year.
Okay.
So the way they're doing it is the NCAA through its basketball money, the NCAA is paying the back money. So the old money that's owed from the past, the NCAA is paying for that. Mm-hmm. Now again, of course, that just means there's less money to give to schools, right? So it's not like they're not being generous. Like it's just, but the NCAA is managing, because one of their whole issues here, guys, is for the schools, financial predictability is really important. And so what they did is they wanted to have the NCAA absorb the back money, and then the schools are handling the money going forward.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? And I don't mean to get us off topic here at all.
No, you can ask anything you want.
But we're talking about the NCAA using basketball money to pay former or pay all the back pay, right? Pay all the back stuff.
Yeah.
How much is that going to hurt like Division II, Division III schools?
So there's a lot of anger about it it's actually mostly Division I schools are mad. It's going to impact the Division II and Division III a little bit. Like everybody will be impacted too by the NCAAs. Like they're going to, they're cutting costs in a big way also. So there's going to be a lot of cost cutting.
And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, the NCAA pretty much pays these Division II, Division III schools to have athletic sports.
They give them a check that helps pay for it. It pays some. It helps. Right. But the big people that are mad about it are the small Division I conferences. Like, and I'm just going to pick on him because I love him because he's actually awesome. Like the Big Sky commissioner is mad as hell about this. Because what it's doing is it's gonna whack a lot of them, and it's not that much money, but they have much smaller budgets. So a little swat to the the Kansas basketball budget is a punch to one of the other places. That's on the mountain in the Big Sky or whatever. But they feel that they are losing disproportionately. I'm going to say something right now. It's going to make people think I'm an ass. Well, you know what? Big 12 fans hate me anyway, so it's fine. It doesn't matter if you think I'm an asshole. But here's the crazy thing is, I'll be honest. There's like 31. I think it's 31 conferences in Division I. So all 31 of those conferences get money from the basketball tournament. That money from the basketball tournament is really only earned pretty much by 5 conferences. Right. It's earned by I mean going forward, right? Because the Pac-12 is gone. It's only earned by the power conferences and the Big East. A Cinderella here or there aside, nobody else. And I've actually done math on it, like by conference, to actually look at like who comes out ahead. And what I find is like the conferences, like those other, this is a gravy train for those other conferences. So this is a little bit like a kid being really mad that their parents were facing bankruptcy and cut their allowance a little bit.
Is this sort of like, I mean, because I can just see cuts coming later on down the road. I can see the NCAA cutting some of these funds that help see their schools out. Is that why there's a lot of schools like right now that, like for instance, Gonzaga, right? Gonzaga is wanting in the Big 12. We know this. It would help their funding a lot to come into the Big 12. I know this. But are they going to struggle any at all with this, with their basketball revenue?
But here's the thing is, again, when you think about the idea, again, it seems like a lot of money. Like when you look at it, because again, it's a hit to them, right? But it's not a catastrophic hit. Like for them to start traveling to Morgantown and Orlando would be a 10x hit over like compared to that. Like actually not necessarily 10. I don't know I haven't done the math. I don't know, but it would be like way more again because these are smaller athletic departments. And the other thing about smaller athletic departments is a lot of your money is spent on people, and it's spent in blocks. So like I've helped some Division III athletic departments. So when you look at it and you're like, oh, they spend $1 million. They actually don't spend $1 million, but they have like 4 people on 3 coaches and a equipment manager, or whatever. And so there's, when you count retirement money and blah, blah, there's $800,000. So they have like a $200,000 budget, but it really looks like $1 million. So again, when you look at these kind of smaller schools where the money's all on people, the money's on facilities, like they don't have a lot of cash. Yeah. So all of a sudden now you're going to take away $100,000. Like, it's not just you're losing 10% of your budget. It's like, you got to like lose one of your coaches or something. Like, so it's a big hit to a lot of these the smaller schools in a different way. And because again, everything gets smaller and then it gets chunkier and it's harder to cut. So that's one of the issues with them. But again, the way that I think about it, again, not to be an asshole here, but like, again, it's like you're literally someone was going to burn your parents' house down and they saved it, but now you get to take a $5 a week haircut on your allowance for 10 years.
All right.
so that's, again, when I did the math, I honestly thought like they were kind of whining. I would be fascinated to hear what Greg Sankey told them when he like summoned them all to Naples for a little shindig to talk about it. Because I think that there was a lot of contention there. But again, they had to do this. Like, this whole settlement is because they've been breaking the law since the NCAA was founded.
Right.
Like, so again, it's not like it just you've been breaking the law and now you have to pay. And the other thing they did is, but I'll tell you guys where I think this is really interesting. There's been a lot of talk about like a lot of people saying they thought the big conferences would break away from the NCAA and ditch the NCAA, make their own NCAA. All these things you hear.
Yeah, those rumors. Yeah.
Well, they wet, and this is the deal with the devil, I think, in a good way for those little conferences and for the Division II and everybody like that who relies on the NCAA, because the NCAA is the one paying for the next 10 years the portion of the settlement going to the old athletes. Nobody's going anywhere. So the model of the NCAA as the organization and having the people there, having that structure, locked itself in place for at least 10 years. And so, if the Mountain West schools are each going to lose, or the Big West schools, whatever it is, going to lose $200,000 a year, guess what, guys? You just bought yourself security. I think that
one more thing too, and I'm only going to bring this up because Todd Wynn's bringing it up in the chat. He says, "Well, when it goes to 105 scholarships, it will cost more." Did you figure that into?
Yeah, so that was actually the next little box we were going to look at.
Okay, good deal.
All right.
The issue for schools here is there's a lot of question about how they're going to handle scholarships. So they're getting rid of the limits on scholarships. Now, by the way, why are they getting rid of the limits on scholarships? Because it's an illegal restraint of trade. That's why. Like, this isn't good. We're not being goody two shoes here. Like, and we're not even being like free market people, right? How old is the Sherman Antitrust Act? Like 1890. So congratulations, guys. College sports is catching up to like free market trends of like the Gilded Age. So they're opening that up. So like baseball, you can give up to 35. So again, whatever the roster limit is, you can give up to that for the full team. And even that roster limit is probably, somebody could hit that in court and that would probably go away too. So they essentially set these to be, as big as possible. You can decide what to do. Well, what people think a lot of schools are going to do is choose where they want to invest heavily and where they're going to stop caring. Now, Boston College has done this for a long time. Boston College swimming has 0 scholarships. So what we may see is more schools doing that, and saying, okay, what we're going to do is we want to have 100 football scholarships, but we're going to have less track and soccer. And then you'll have other schools, right? Like East Carolina baseball. I bet East Carolina baseball, like they love baseball in East Carolina. I bet they fully fill the whole team up. And probably like, I don't know, I'm making this up. Maybe like, track and swimming are going to take that out of Hyde. So there's going to be a lot of it's going to have, there's going to be more scholarships in some places, but they're probably going to move scholarships in others. So like another school, Portland. Portland's a huge, like big time soccer school, right? But it's actually like a really small Catholic school. So they're going to probably double down on soccer and trim elsewhere. Your rifle team, your national championship rifle team, they can put everybody on the rifle team on scholarship now if they want.
That was funny because you sent me something one day that we was talking about rifling or something.
Uh-huh.
You said Big 12 rifling budget is like $2.4 million. I think that's all West Virginia, isn't it?
It probably is. It probably is. There's a few of that. Like Big 10 synchronized swimming is just Ohio State, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few like that. But one of the things we looked at here is what would it take? And again, this was sort of my estimate on what I thought it would take to plus up all your sports. So, your school's actually fairly affordable. And you'll see this in a minute here with on some other stuff, but like your school doesn't cost a lot in scholarships. So,
well, tell
you guys can kind of afford them.
That's because our synchronized thinking team, they only get a scholarship for 1 year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But actually, here's another thing. Let's be honest. I think your school's gotten a little smaller recently, hasn't it? Enrollment's down.
It has. Enrollment is down, and I know a lot of people are attributing that to the past few years of football being down, and they feel like the numbers are going to come back up when we get, especially after this year. Now that's what I hear.
It mostly has to do with birth rate.
It probably so.
Yeah.
Although if it had to do with birth rate, let me tell you what, there's a lot of babies born in West Virginia. There ain't nothing else to do around here. But
here's the thing is, like you guys know about the demographic cliff that's going to hit in about a year and a half, right? Do you guys know about that?
Right.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Just if anybody's missing this, U.S. birth rate has been declining, but then when the 2008 recession happened, and it was just a shock to the economy. A lot of like parents who were planning families, a ton of them put off having kids. And so like the general birth rate, all those kids who weren't born in 2008 and 2009, therefore do not start college in 2026. So they think that there may be up to 15% fewer students in some cases than normal for a lot of these schools.
All right, but here's my projection. All right, you ready to hear my projection? In 2038, there will be a huge boom of college students influxed into all these universities because of 2020.
I mean, we joke, but like it probably is true. Like you're probably right. There's probably gonna be a little baby boom in that. But one of the big issues with this, because the stuff's going down overall, because schools. So a lot of schools have excess capacity. So one of the things you could argue here with your scholarships, and this is where, school finances get really interesting is, can Ren Baker go to the CFO and just say like, hey, I want to bring some out-of-state rifling kids in. Don't charge me for tuition. You could probably make the argument that like it doesn't actually cost West Virginia very much to have like one more person who wasn't going to be there anyway.
Right.
So there is some interesting debates to be had in that with like, again, how you account for it is really interesting. And there's some schools I've noticed, by the way, and I can see that they're doing this on their finances. Like the amount of money they get they pay in scholarships is like the same as the amount of money the school subsidizes back. I'm like, I see what you're doing there. So they're trying to kind of balance it out. So there's always some interesting stuff there, but it's an issue. So we think about like if you guys were going to not count your subsidies and you were going to go, balls to the wall here. We get that third black line here. That's your unsubsidized, like, profitability or exposure. Basically, West Virginia would have to come up with about $18 million a year. If you went full on, you're probably not going to go full on. So, cut that in half, about 10. You're about 10 million short. And then again, if we look back to, again, putting back in those subsidies, because again, you have the subsidy, they're part of your accounting, all that. You're looking at about because you about break even, right now, you're looking at about the same amount of money as you'd pay out in your revenue share. So they need to essentially, you think about it, they basically need to fundraise or cut all the new money. And that puts you guys again, you're in a good position. So, everybody's going to be stressing, but you're going to be stressing a lot less than some people.
So what you're saying is if Shane would like make a donation of $100 million right now to West University, for 10 years, they could operate really high. They could do really good for at least 10
exactly.
years.
But yeah, because when you're in good shape,
but he ain't coming off that money. Shane won't come off that $100 million.
No, it's in my couch cushions, and I have to burn them to get that out of there. So
yeah, it depends.
We got to beat Penn State.
If the lotto's good to you, you can get it. Just go to Vegas for a weekend.
We just got to beat Penn State, and who have to burn that couch? Who have to dig the money out then, and we'll have it.
Exactly. Just don't burn the banana stand. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. So I mean, the overall story here for West Virginia is, you guys are in fairly good shape, but it means you're going to have to decide, like, are we going to find that 20 million somewhere, or are we going to have to cut stuff? And by the way, some of the cutting of stuff is kind of doable. And I'll just pick on swimming, right? Because I have a lot of swimmer friends. A lot of the schools that pay a lot of money, that dump a ton of money into swim programs, Why? You know, they're not sending people to the Olympics.
No.
So could you do what Boston College does? Actually, Boston College is a bad example. I think they just had hazing arrests on their swim team. That's not a good thing. Pretend they don't have that though. You know, could you do what Boston College does and be and just, you know, again, why do we have athletics? Well, we have it for lots of benefits for developing you as a person and you as a student athlete. Lots of benefits for the school, leadership development, things like that. We have it for retention. We have it for a lot of things, recruiting of actual students, stuff like that. Lots of good advantages. None of those involve like training kids for the Olympics. So can we get all those advantages without paying the cost of, you know, what we're paying in some of these sports? Yeah, there's actually really good stuff. I'll give you guys a silly example. NYU, Division III and club teams. Instead of dumping money into like Division I sports, they have like lavish club teams. And you know what? They get a lot of the same experience for the student athlete. There's actually there's some money that can be cut in all of these sports. In some of these schools, other schools, and you guys are going to see, I don't think they have as much money. Kansas State is one. Again, Kansas State is really well run, but if you're not wasting money, then it's harder to cut money. It sounds like a stupid thing to say, but I think it's really true.
Now, let me ask you a question, Tony, real quick, because I know that you have a prior commitment. There's something else you need to do, and we're like about 5 minutes late here. Do you want to stop here and pick it up later, or do you want to keep going?
Here, we'll go through really quick. We'll look at everybody else.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Time just been flying by. We got So Kansas State, pretty similar to you guys, right? You know, Kansas State is break even, much like you guys are almost break even. So you think about you guys in Kansas State. One of the things, by the way, about the Big 12 I think is really good is a lot of your schools are very similar financially with their athletic departments. So because of that, your leaders are going to strategize in like a lot of the same way. And I think that's a really strong thing for you guys. So Kansas State, again, very similar to you guys, but Kansas State has a little bit less to absorb if they need to hit a shock. Kansas is interesting to me because Kansas is also very close to break even. You know, they come out pretty much well ahead, but they spend a fortune on basketball and like charter jets and all that. So, you know, kudos to Kansas. Like Travis Goff, the stuff that he's doing there is phenomenal. Like what Kansas has done to turn around their athletic department, new stadium, like all is like golden. So like go Jayhawks. Iowa State is a lot like Kansas State. Again, pretty break even, and you see these guys are solid here. And again, now that means that they're going to, these, by the way, again, once the schools are all going to have to find money, we get to the G5s, that'll be really interesting. Texas Tech, also very similar. You know, but Texas Tech, remember, they have donors for a lot of stuff, so that they can find stuff. So we take a look at Texas Tech here, when all of a sudden we start to see they're not as negative as a lot of people. So Texas Tech may be easier to find some money. And if you know, Cody, I forget his name, the cell phone company, like Zillionaire from Texas Tech, like Texas Tech may be able to drop some coin. Oklahoma State, again, very much those Big 8 schools, just really like solidly well run. It just means any of the new money they're gonna have to find. Now let's get to the G5 editions. So now look here. Now we start to see ups and downs. Here's something that's really interesting. Now Cincinnati's, because they've been so heavily subsidizing, the question is, are they going to cut those subsidies now as Big 12 money starts to come in? Now, again, remember, there's real Big 12 money doesn't come in for another year. So they're still on half share for another year. But once that money starts to come in, Cincinnati may be okay. Like depending on the sort of subsidy levels and how that's working, you'll notice Cincinnati actually like starts to come up to not be in bad shape.
Their basketball probably helps them a lot too.
Yeah, it probably does. But yeah, if Cincinnati just keeps their current level of subsidy, they can absorb all of that new money and all of the scholarships they need. Yeah. Because they're so heavily subsidizing. That's really interesting.
It is interesting. I'm looking at, you know, I see a lot of black, but at the same time, like you say, they can take them subsidies away, and that'll pull those numbers down too. So that'll help
Exactly. So
everybody all across the board.
Exactly. Yeah. Essentially, there's so again they lose their unsubsidized there is negative 32, but they're going to be getting about 38 more. This is all based on FY23. So that's the issue. And by the way, Big 12 fans, your next 2 fiscal years are going to look screwy because you don't start your real new TV deal doesn't start till FY26. So your FY25 numbers are going to look really screwy, and like people are going to make the like people who like talk about this stuff on the internet are going to like talk shit, but like it's fine because you're going to have like one mediocre year, and then the Big 12 will be fine. Then we move on. Central Florida, same thing as Cincinnati.
Yeah,
now
but they increased. They put $5 more on each kid.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. Exactly. When we looked at like earlier, they have so many students that like they have a little more room to absorb that kind of thing. Exactly. Yeah. Everybody gives a quarter, and now we can buy jets.
Will says Memphis had gotten in instead of Cincy.
Hey, I think Memphis would have been great for the Big 12. Houston. Now, Houston, by the way, I don't know if you guys heard, Houston is doing terribly on so the left side is generated revenue. That's how much money are you really bringing in? So when we looked at those other schools, Cincinnati here was bringing in 49, Central Florida 47, Houston 34. Houston is just like not making any money on their own. And that's why their AD got fired. The new AD's coming in, and their president, I think she's amazing. She's literally one of the best presidents in the country. I think she's awesome. And she has declared that they're going to fix that problem.
Yeah, because that's a huge subsidy, $48.2 million.
Yeah, and the reason it's so big is because there's nothing on the positive side.
Right.
So that's Houston is one that raises eyebrows. Okay, like Houston, you got troubles. You got to bring money in. So that's an interesting one. And now, shall we have some fun? Shall we get to the pack?
Oh, well,
you guys ready
now,
for this?
Now let's be fair and honest.
Are you sitting down?
Here. The PAC schools are going to be a lot better, in my opinion, because number one, they're higher academic schools. They have a lot more money. They have a lot more influence because of that. So I think that mostly the PAC schools that came into the Big 12 are going to be a lot better off. Now that's my thought.
All right. Well,
am I wrong? Saying you're muted?
Well, I said we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. Yeah. It might not translate.
May not.
Well, let's see here. So let's start off with Utah, who looks a lot like a Big 12 school. First of all, financially, Utah will fit very well in the Big 12 financially. So that's a good thing. And by the way, guys, the reason I think it's good for you guys for the school to fit in is because when you think about like the presidents running it, like you want people who want the same things and have the same situations so that you're making like smart decisions for you. You could make an argument when we look at some of these other schools in a minute. Maybe USC and Washington and Oregon were not the ones that should have been setting the policy for the Pac-12 based on what you're about to see with some of these schools. When you look at the red ink. So I think it's good for you. Again, Utah, really solid, looks just like the Big 12 schools. But when we looked at broader Utah's budget, if Utah needs to find $10 million, they can find $10 million pretty easily.
Yeah.
So, Utah in good shape. Colorado has been in terrible shape. Because Colorado's bad in most of their sports. They're not good, right? Like Cal is losing a fortune, but Cal's spending that money to have they can probably cobblestone the roads with Olympic gold medals for Cal.
I bet they're good at snow skiing. They
are good at snow skiing. But there's only like 10 schools that do that. So, there's not very many. So again, Colorado, you want to know why did Colorado do all the Dion stuff? Why did Colorado take the bribe from Brett Yormark to like leave before anybody else? Because they are so bad financially. Now, we haven't gotten their FY24 numbers, but supposedly as Dion came in, they started to make a lot more money. So this is, right before Dion came. So, give that a caveat, but Colorado in bad shape. Colorado, again, following the lead of USC in spending was not a good thing for Colorado. So it's kind of funny. Right. Your G5 schools are in better financial shape than Colorado. And now let's look at Arizona State. Hemorrhaging cash.
Yeah.
Hemorrhaging. Wow. But here's the great thing about Arizona State. You know what they've decided to do? You remember why we looked at can you afford it?
They can.
Yeah.
They said, F it. Sure. So Arizona State has just restructured their whole athletic department to treat it like an academic cost center. Arizona State says, we don't lose money. We choose to spend. And we have plenty of money, and damn it, we will choose to spend on what we want to choose to spend it on. So they're actually taking away the way their entire athletic department is budgeted, and they're going to choose how much they want to fund and fund it just like you would an academic department. They had a whole announcement about this. Arizona State had $350 million of athletic debt. You know how much they have now?
Zero. They just wrote it off.
Yeah, they just absorb. Yeah. Now again, one of the things, by the way, is there may be some issues because schools have to file declarations of things for gender equity purposes and legal things and all that. So the Arizona State finances may still look a little screwy going forward, but know that internally Arizona State has decided that they are just going to do what they want, and they are massive, and they're making a fortune, and life is good. Their president is brilliant. Their president is repeatedly one of the top university presidents on the planet. And a lot of people hate that he let the athletic director do what he did, but they have just doubled down. If you're a Sun Devil, it is good to be a Sun Devil because you're now floating on a yacht on top of your Reading. You're good.
Yeah.
So with what you just said there, Tony, are we talking Title IX? It's not. Yeah.
Yeah. So remember how I said there's ways they file the accountings and they're really screwy. The original purpose of all these disclosures that everybody uses is actually so they can track spending for Title IX. In fact, when you see one of those reports that people use, all the private school information comes from. It's called EADA. That's the law. It's called the Equity and Athletics Disclosure Act. So the reason sports accountings are often a little screwy is because they're actually their real base, their real purpose. Now we bastardize them to use the numbers for all kinds of things, but the original numbers are based on gender equity reporting.
Can I ask you a question because you're probably the only person that would know this?
What's that?
Are there any women's sports at any university that actually make money?
So again, whether you make money is going to be really debatable. There's a few, right? I'm sure I would bet. I can't say. I would have to bet UConn and South Carolina basketball probably.
LSU basketball for the girls, maybe.
I can guarantee you Iowa. I can guarantee you Iowa the last few years has made a lot of money.
In last year they probably did, maybe not normally. Because one of the other real questions here, guys, when you get to, and I'm going to be, when we want to be accounting dorks on this, is one of the real questions too is what are you actually expensing against that? Are you counting the maintenance of the arena?
Right.
How do you account for all this stuff?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And so depending on depending on the costs you hit at it, things start to get really interesting. I'll give you an example. When you look at a lot of sport, and also how you account for things also matters. So for example, you look at Syracuse. John Wildhack runs the Syracuse AD. He's runs a great shop. Syracuse of their athletic department budget of whatever it is, 150 million, something like that. Only $9 million is unallocated. Everything else, they're calculating how much gets expensed to soccer, how much gets expensed to lacrosse, all that kind of stuff. You look at USC, out of their like $270 million budget or whatever it is, USC has like $150 million unallocated that they just call overhead.
So that also makes it hard to know if a women's sport is actually doing good, right? That can also make it mask it.
You'd have to really know, what are you hitting everything again? Like, how are you internally accounting for everything? And it gets really screwy. So, again, Syracuse is nickel and diming. They've got brilliant, great accountants. They're hitting all those. They're expensing all those costs to the sport, versus USC is dumping them in just an overhead pile.
Yeah, big pot of money and everybody just grabs. Yeah.
And again, that may be because of you remember there's accountants that are translating USC's accounting to match the forms and the styles and all that. And it may just be that USC's accounting structure doesn't match well with that, and that's why they do it that way. So I'll give you an example. I do the charts every year that you look at spending by sport. This actually came from a conversation with an AD. I'm going to start going forward allocating out, like I can't do it officially, but like essentially allocating out that unallocated money. Because, again, we're picking on my beloved Trojans, but USC spending a lot more money than it looks like on those forms. Yeah, not shady or anything. But now you guys ready for the last one? Should we look at the real train wreck?
Let's see it.
Yeah, let's look at the train wreck.
Zona!
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And by the way, remember, their school lost $250 million because they couldn't add right.
That minus 40.3 million unsubsidized potential profitability. 47.6 million in academic subsidy.
Yeah.
Whew. I mean, that's G5 numbers.
Oh, it's worse. It's worse than any. It's like actually there's like one G5. I think it's the second. If I could be wrong. I just off the top of my head. I think the only school worse was James Madison.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's like second worst in the country. And the school's in financial. That's why the president got fired. The school's in financial crisis. The athletic department's in financial crisis. And they just brought in Ernst & Young to do like a whole study. And Ernst & Young is like, you got to make more money. It's like, oh, thanks, guys.
That's why I picked at the beginning of the show when I said, is Arizona State in trouble? Are they in good shape? Because I knew Arizona was like in a dumpster fire. And so, it's kind of like, I don't know about you guys, but like I look at it as like North Carolina and NC State, right? If North Carolina was hemorrhaging money and NC State wasn't, could you imagine the controversy down there in North Carolina, and they'd be back and forth? I wonder if that's going on in Arizona right now, that there's just some kind of a
well, again, one of your issues to get that president of Arizona State, by the way, the president of Arizona State, like we talk about him being innovative. He used to, as president of Arizona State, he was also the chairman of the CIA's venture capital fund for them. He's on the board and chairman of the board. He is freaking genius, and he's awesome. Again, sort of botched up the football team a little bit. People are mad about that.
But they have.
It's fair for them to be mad. But
now, if I'm not mistaken, Tony, Arizona and Arizona State have the same regions.
Same regions.
Yeah.
But this is why, if you guys remember, a little bit of controversy here. The fired president of Arizona thought he was going to decided he wanted to join the Big 12. One of the things that I knew from long before was that if Arizona State didn't want to go to the Big 12, if Arizona State wanted to stay with Cal and Stanford, Arizona wasn't going with them. And there was a humiliating, apparently, meeting where he told Mac Rhodes, the night before the whole pack blew up, he told Mac Rhodes from Baylor, okay, we're going to come. And then he went down in a regents meeting and sat down, and the Arizona State president said, no, you're not. And the regents were like, you're a financial disaster. Shut up and listen to Dr. Crow. They didn't word it quite like that, I guess. They're probably a little nicer. But Arizona left that meeting that night knowing that if Arizona State didn't go, they weren't going. And they had to call the Big 12 and be like, sorry, we're kidding. And then like, at 6 o'clock in the morning, they're like, no, we're unkidding again. We're coming. So it was all that. Washington and Oregon just ditched us. We're coming after all. But yeah, that's that whole mess came from, because again, Arizona, very poorly managed. Arizona State's losing more money.
Yeah, Tony, but how can a commissioner look at these, like if he had the information and you're actively seeking these schools, is Arizona State that strong that you're going to take in a sinking ship like
Arizona? Your question is, are they actually sinking? And the issue is they're not. You can argue Arizona's sinking. Arizona State is just like spending because like they feel like. Yeah. Because actually, I will tell you, I would guess. I don't know their actual subsidy numbers. I would guess that Baylor and TCU are worse than this.
Yeah.
And I would get, but again, it may, because it's coming from donors, maybe not. But like like how you account for it, can vary a lot. I would bet that Baylor and TCU are not making. They're not more positive in the revenue side. So Baylor, BYU, and TCU, the private schools, are probably also subsidizing enormous amounts because they feel like it and they can. So they're probably more like Arizona State. But Arizona State, remember, we were talking about Kansas State. What do they have, like 14,000 students now?
Yeah.
And Arizona State has 170,000. And half of them are online, so it costs the school nothing.
Right. That's what I was going to say. A lot of those are online students.
Which is
Do you see more schools going to an online? Do you see more schools going to an online campus like that?
I think there's going to be a lot more of that. I think there's going to be more online just overall. You're going to see more digital stuff. But I'll tell you, so I actually have like a really interesting chart I was working on in this, and I just got busy and I have to finish and come back. But I think there's going to be essentially an assault on schools from all directions. So one of the issues that's going to happen is we talked about like the declining birth rate and all that, and the huge issue coming with the enrollment cliff. So what's going to happen is, I'm just going to make stuff up here, right? But like, if Harvard and Stanford and Yale decide they don't feel like being smaller, they're just going to take more kids, and those are kids that are going to go to Harvard now instead of going to Northwestern and Michigan and Cal Berkeley. And so then now they're going to have to reach down if they don't want to get smaller, as the pocket smaller. So everybody's going to be pulling kids up, and the further you go down the chain, the more kids are going to get pulled up.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, so it's just like magnifies itself as you go like sort of down the chain. But also there's so much more push for online and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's also pull at the bottom. They're pulling kids out of the pool to go on, for various stuff, and that's making things worse. Plus, in the economy, there's like, things like, you hear kids like, jumping into like programming jobs and stuff like, so there's some kids like, not going to college overall. So I think there's really an assault in every direction on college enrollment. And the further you go down the chain of like where kids choose to go to school, the harder it's going to be on you. So again, West Virginia, you guys are a flagship state. You're land grant school. You're a state flagship. You have a lot of it. You're the school of the state. You have a lot of advantages that I think are going to help you. So you think about like, okay, who's this going to hit? The MAC schools are really worried. The Sunbelt schools, again, Sunbelt athletics are already. We didn't look at the Sunbelt here, guys. The Sunbelt is hemorrhaging money.
NAIA Division II schools are going to lose kids. I mean, it's just going to be.
Oh no, they're going to close.
Yeah.
I mean, we're already seeing schools close. There's going to be NAIA Division II schools, Division III schools. Some of them are just going to close, and it's going to be crazy in the next couple of years. Because again, we think about like the feed. You go further down the chain, way down the chain, it's going to be really rough. So that's just another issue. Whereas you take a look at what were we, Arizona State with $4 billion. Arizona State's got and by the way, they don't even have a med school yet. They're starting one. This budget is without a med school. Colorado, half of theirs is the med school. And then you got 140,000 students overall, counting the online kids.
I didn't know that they were that big. I thought they were in the, 80K, 70K. Houston, I didn't realize was that big.
But there's actually the crazy thing is there's also like I think there's like two kinds of I could be Sun Devil fans I can't see the chat, but Sun Devil fans, correct us if I'm wrong. I think they have like two levels of online kids, because I think there's online like classes and everything that are still part of the actual campus, and then there's the actual entirely separate online school, which is technically a separate school. It actually gets classified as like a separate institution, but like under Arizona State, kind of like a satellite campus.
Yeah.
And it actually gets ranked in some rankings. Their online school gets ranked on its own, and it's actually pretty good compared to a lot of other stuff. Arizona, by the way, also has an online school. It's just theirs is losing money instead of making money. Because Arizona State built theirs from scratch, so it's a really good school. Arizona like bought one of those schools that was like under investigation as like a scam. So it's really interesting. But I think what we really see from this is overall the Big 12 is in really good shape. But I think that you may see the Big 12 overall. Some of these schools don't have the money to just absorb things like Ohio State can. So you may start to see you're going to start to see schools making choices and having to figure out kind of what they want to do. But I think overall, Big 12 schools are in better shape than a lot of people think.
Well, West Virginia just went through some growing pains and cut some majors that weren't, that they felt weren't, I don't know how to.
Yeah, they thought weren't very important to them.
Yeah, they didn't. They either an enrollment issue or they just weren't, getting.
Well, okay. Let me be a huge jerk here in defense of your president. Massive problems are coming to a lot of colleges, like we talked about financially. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong in this, but like I think he got out ahead of it.
Oh, I agree. People are all upset about it, but I mean, some of these schools, I mean, one was like the Chinese department. If you want to learn Chinese, go to China.
Get a book. Go subscribe to Duolingo.
Rosetta Stone.
Hooked on phonics.
Again, we're talking when we think, but if we think about it, if he has to choose, do I want to cut something to the nursing program, or do I want to cut the Chinese language department? Because the other thing that I read an interview with him that I thought was really interesting. Because again, he was president of Brown, he was president of Vanderbilt, he's been president of Ohio State. Yeah. He's a legend. And what I thought he said that was really interesting is and again, this relates to like the research you do and everything else. He basically said, some of these things we're getting rid of are things that don't matter to our state and that we're not very good at. So why are we doing them?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't know a single person in the state of West Virginia, unless they came from China, that speaks Mandarin. Not a single person.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is, if in the future, because then remember too, guys, like when you think about like languages, if you're not just thinking about like teaching kids the language, right? You're talking about like a whole department that specializes in the research and study of the culture. It's kind of like, it's really funny. Like some of my kids from business school, like thought they would. They heard the funniest story. Like they thought they signed up for like a pottery class. Like, oh, that'll be fun. And they're in like a Masters of Fine Arts pottery program.
Good luck.
They were like, oh crap, this is not where we're supposed to be. And so like that's the thing is like, again, if it's not that kids at West Virginia aren't going to learn math. It's just that West Virginia was like, we don't do cutting edge math stuff here. So like, let's get rid of the like pretending that we do and use that money on stuff that we need. He took a lot of flack for it, and I actually thought he was pretty smart.
Yeah, well, people, there's a lot of people with hurt feelings on that, but when you make a tough choice, that's why it's a tough choice, right?
And by the way, I say that my apologies to the staff and the kids because it's gut wrenching and it's hard, it's awful. Right. But I thought you guys were getting out ahead of your broader
problem. Retirement. They're not. They're going to be okay.
I'm sure they got a golden parachute and
Yeah.
they're okay. And students can obviously find another university at opposite if that's what they want to do.
So anyway, so that's the Big 12 finances overall. Sorry guys, I didn't mean to go too
was
late.
perfect.
I hope it wasn't a
That
problem.
was fantastic. I love the rundown.
So-
I mean, the visuals were great because you know what? You could tell me all day that it's subsidized and they're getting money from donors, but when I see the lines, there's, oh my gosh, it paints a picture. And
Yeah, I'm actually going to
oh.
go back and watch. I'm actually going to go back and
Right.
watch this show again to absorb that a little bit more because we went through the charts pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'll send you a PDF. I'll make a PDF of it too and send it over to you.
Fantastic, because I encourage everybody to go back and watch this video again. Look at these subsidies. Look at this. Look at the financials of these athletic departments, and make your own decision whether or not you think your athletic department is doing well or is struggling. But anyway, you can find Tony
also,
Altimore.
guys, remember too to always be thinking about, again, it's kind of like, you think about like rich people spending money stupidly, but it's not stupid because they can do it. And so that's where you think about your question is, and let's pick on the Sun Belt, like Arizona State's doing what they want, and that's just fine for Arizona State. The problem is the Sun Belt schools can't afford to do that, and some of them are doing it anyway.
Right.
So, Tony, real quick, and I know you got to go. I've got to touch on this real quick.
Yeah.
Big 12 talked about getting outside help, about getting, a investor, so to speak, into the Big 12, and also selling naming rights to the Big 12, things like that. I think the naming rights is okay. I'm worried about the investor part. I think universities, and we have seen some universities come forward and say they are going to look at it at private and equity. I think that's okay for a university level. I'm wondering about Big 12 level.
So let me give you my thought on that. First of all, I think the selling of the naming rights is fine. It's fine. Like, is it a little crass? Yeah. But you know what?
But State Farm presents the Big 12, so what?
Think about what Kansas State has been hit with enrollment issues. You guys are getting hit with enrollment issues. If that gives you $5 million a year, take it.
Right.
The Big 12 becomes the Big 12 presented by Allstate. You know what? Whatever. Take the money. I actually don't. And again, people were surprised that I was like, that's money you can take. There's two levels of the private equity thing here that I think would be interesting. So the first one is, and I'm going to sound like weird here, but I'm going to call it like regular private equity, or what I consider to be like outsourcing private equity. Mm-hmm. So let me give you an example. There's companies that do things like there's companies, Playfly is a company. They come in and like they're like brilliant at like optimizing tickets and like your ticketing pricing and all. There's like people who do ticket pricing and pricing stuff of general like math PhDs, brilliant people. Like you're doing some really great hard stuff that's hard for the school to do. So you outsource it, right? You let those people do it. And it's really no different than like outsourcing your dining halls to Sodexo or, whatever. Like you let people who know what they're doing do the stuff better. And there's a really fine line between outsourcing where somebody else can do it better than you and cheaper than you, and actually like taking on investors and like, needing their money, and you're locked into them and they can make decisions that are good for them but bad for you. And that's like regular private equity. And so when we think about, people talk about like, we want to bring in private equity, bringing in like regular private equity, I think would be a really bad idea, because remember, schools can borrow money cheaper than private equity firms can. Right. The schools aren't going anywhere. Yeah. So when we think about, should we bring in regular private equity? I think no. I thought it was a bad idea when I heard about it, but where I hold out judgment is I say, okay, I want to see, is this that regular private equity that's bad, or is this just some glorified version of outsourcing? Because,
I look at that way too, Tony, because go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, like, for example, a lot of these schools, and some of these schools have already done this, right? But like, what if you turn over the management of your arena to a real estate management firm that like manages arenas? they're probably better at some of the stuff than you are. And maybe you're okay. So again, you think it's like real estate people doing real estate things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I don't mind that. Now, you want to make sure you're not going to be in like a bad situation where you're going to have problems, but bringing in specialty people to do specialty things, I don't mind. I just don't see where it would be smart to, we're going to give you 10% of the school, because then all they care about is making that 10% bigger. And that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Versus
that's where I'm like that too, Tony, because I'm always like, I'm thinking to myself, okay, we could get $1 billion from the Middle East into private equity funded by oil. What the hell do they know about college football? Where are they going to
let me give one other level. Let me give you one other level of private equity that we can't account for, and that is stupid Middle East money.
Yeah.
So like you look like all the dumb shit. I used to live in Saudi Arabia. So I actually know the Saudis very well, and like they do some things that are like really like stupid waste of money. So if you're gonna find like somebody who will just give you stupid money, which is really no different than a donor. Like, right? Like, donors are something smarter than what the Middle Eastern money that comes in, like, to stupid projects. But by the way, one of the funny things about the Middle East, let me tell you a little secret. A lot of times they promise stupid money and something gets started and then the money disappears and somebody's left holding the bag.
Mm-hmm. And 5 years later, they sell it. And then you have no idea where it's going to go.
Or actually, they never finished buying it in the first place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that happens too. So like, and then like somebody's left holding the bag and they're like, but you said so. Like there may be some issues with that. But again, my thought on the conference is, my guess is that anything that they would do probably is going to be more like actual, because again, our athletics departments are run by smart people who are working their butts off. So like I would think that they would be smart enough not to do something dumb like, give somebody else a big percent, in exchange for ownership, if like that's not a situation where they think it's going to be really profitable. Because, there's just a lot of issues. But again, one of the things too, guys, with schools that are facing this huge downturn in enrollment, if they can take something that eases their financials off, I say go for it.
Well, Tony, I appreciate you coming in tonight. So Tony can be found on X and at all social media platforms at TJ Altamore. And listen, guys, I know there's been some turmoil out there in the Big 12, but Tony's a fantastic guy. Tony's an amazing guy.
I love my real Big 12 friends. There's like you guys have, let's be honest. Let's be honest. There's like 24 morons on Twitter. And then
they're mostly West Virginia fans. They're mostly West Virginia fans that are the good people to you. Right?
Well, I love the West Virginia
fans. Am I wrong?
Oh, I have because I have tons of people who don't realize I have so many real friends that actually like go to these schools. I've gone to these schools and like help teach classes at these schools. So I just kind of laugh. Like somebody was telling me, this is really funny to me. This was a couple weeks ago. So I was like reading on Twitter about like how I hate some school, which is completely wrong. Well, I was literally like on the phone with their athletic department, like talking them through some stuff. And I was like, I probably am not on the phone with your athletic department if I hate them.
Yeah, true.
I'm probably actually really like them because they're actually like awesome people. So
Tony, we do appreciate. I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate you came on with us for like an hour and a half now, and
glad to
give
help.
us some amazing charts, amazing graphs. I love it, man. I love it. We've had some great comments out there. I don't want to address all them comments because I know, Tony, that you're running late to what you've got to go to, but Tony, I want to tell you, we really love you. We really love you, and we appreciate you. And hey, come back with us again.
And we glad to. We'll celebrate. Hopefully, we'll have a great game with Penn State. Go Mountaineers!
All right, thank you, Tony.
We'll see you guys.
You have a great night. All right, Tony. All right, so everyone, I appreciate everyone that tuned in with us tonight. Shane, what did you think about all that?
Drinking from the fire hose of knowledge. Tony always just can just hit you with both barrels of the smart shotgun. And we definitely got all the pellets, some in the butt, some in the back, some in the back of the head. But we definitely got both salvos of what he has. But he's a gem. I love him.
Yeah, Tony's a great guy. Everyone out there, we appreciate everybody coming in with tonight. I know I didn't get to address everybody in the comments. It's come in and out. I've done a few comments up there, but honestly, I was not monitoring chat because I had this on full screen so I could actually see the charts really well. And so I didn't have the chat up to where I could even see it. But I do love all of you guys. I do appreciate everybody coming in tonight. And I hope everyone had a good time. And hey, we will talk to everyone next time.